Anna is the Chief Enabling or / Evolving Officer at the School of System Change, and she's also the author of Cultivating System Change. And she focuses on transformative change practices and how these are applied in, she will be focusing on, transformative change practices and how these are applied in other sectors. And all of us have benefited from training from the School of System Change. So we're really pleased that Anna's here today. I'll pass over to you, Anna.
Thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me and for having me here. If I could share my screen, that would be really great. Just check that that's coming through. Is that good? Can you see that?
It's just loading. It's just loading, Anna. Yeah, we can see.
Great. So thank you so much for inviting me to speak today. I guess, as you said, you introduced, we're the School of System Change. We apply systems change as the approach to transformation. And I'm going to just spend 7 minutes just giving you a bit of the why and also a bit of the broader framing. And Rachel and I had a quick kind of connection yesterday to sort of say, I won't necessarily go into all the different examples, but kind of hopefully frame up a bit of context of what we mean by transformational approaches. But here are some different cases and stories of transformation and projects that I've worked on over the many, many years. And what I want to say is that, you know, these approaches can be applied. I started my career in education, worked on marine issues, equity, food, worked in business, in public sector, worked in health and place-based. And I guess this is coming from very grounded experience of the different approaches of how you create change. And a lot of our experiences, how do we bring these multi-methods, bring these different approaches to whatever context that you find yourself in. So really hoping we might find ways to collaborate with Justice Futures in the future about how do we bring these systems approaches to your context. But I'm also very passionate about the justice system because I spent many years as a trustee at the Forgiveness Project, an organisation in the UK. Sorry, it got very loud here during lunch, so hopefully you can't hear that too much. So why systems approaches? Why do we need a different approach and transformation to the work that we're doing? And I love this slide, and it's not mine, it's from somebody else, but it kind of summarises this idea that usually the way that we create change is kind of based on assumptions of kind of Newtonian paradigms of A to B, when actually the world is actually complex and the world is interconnected. And so how do we create a change approach aligned to that paradigm? At the school, our mission is to nurture a living relational systemic paradigm where learning is change. So what does that mean from a paradigm perspective? Because I know that is key at the underpinning of what you're doing at Justice Futures. It's a way of seeing the world that is alive and ever changing. It's a set of interconnected, nested systems. So how do you work at the individual level, maybe the organizational level, the sector level, the global level? How do we work and create change at all these different levels? And how do we see systems as networks of relationships? That it's really about the people and the way that we work, and changing the system is about the relationships. And how do we do that in a healthy way? So that power is really about the relational throne. How do we ensure that there's healthy power as a real paradigmal shift? And that creating change is really through a change of process of learning, this constant process of learning, iterating, adapting. So this is kind of the why we need to do it. We need to take a systemic and complexity-based approach to creating change, because a lot of the time when we say the word transformation or say the word systems change, we're really looking at, we kind of assume that we're trying to create the change, the outcome of the system. But what's just as important and what is nested in and a part of that is the process by which we create change and the systemic practices. I think you're calling them transformational approaches, but I think there's a lot of alignment between us on that, of how does that paradigm embed itself in your practice that then creates the change processes that then can create the outcome. And these really things are connected and related to each other. So how do we go about creating change from a different approach to transformation that then will affect the outcomes we want to see in whatever systems we're working at? So the process, you know, there are multiple different processes out there in terms of how you cultivate that systems change, really defining, you know, what is the boundary and the goals that we're shifting, and how do we shift to different paradigmal goals, you know, from a system that often doesn't value the kind of thriving potential and the ability of people to restore themselves and to reform themselves, rather than systems that can maybe be about, you know, retribution and some of the issues there. How do we shift the goals? How do we understand the challenges, the issues the diagnostic of the system? How do we find the areas of potential and leverage in the system? And how do we continually learn, adapt, deliver? And it's really, as I say, a relational social process, and really also about the inner condition that how do we as people bring that systemic practice and mindset to the work that we're doing. So at the school, we have a curriculum that really plays with the systemic worldview as a way of being and working at these multiple levels as a core to the approaches that we need for change. We don't come with one approach. We think there is multi-method. There are so many different approaches, the adaptability of these approaches to whatever context. So we are really learning in practice, kind of inquiring and working through in action in the world. And we need a number of different capabilities to do that. We need to see the system differently, and I see that you're using the word seeing in it. We need to make choices and strategize differently. We need to think about our leadership. What approaches do we need to leadership? How do we experiment and innovate differently? And really the importance, and we're really lifting these up as an organization more recently in this sort of adaptation of our capabilities, is how do we engage and facilitate? Like this idea of facilitation and leadership, not just as from within who we are, but how do we facilitate, engage others really in that movement and transformation? And there's a real core transformative practice. And then how do we constellate for change? So really like the collaboration paradigm in here, how do we bring people together as ecosystems, as movements, to create change and constellate differently for change, and continually to learn and weave our narratives together for that change. So really these are some of the core of our capabilities, but therefore you could say the core of a transformational approach to creating change. And at the heart of it really is about people, how we come together, how we constellate, how we talk, how we discuss, how we build our capacity, how we really start to explore these things. And that really is at the heart of a lot of what we believe is the process of transformation. So I kind of end and give you that slide as a way to kind of stimulate what is it that means. It can get very technical and quite theoretical, but I haven't got more time to share some of the stories underneath it, but I thought I'd just give a few framings of what we mean by transformational change and the paradigm and practices that might be required to do that. So thank you very much for inviting me to come today and sort of framing up some of these questions and thoughts about how we create transformational change.
Thank you so much, Anna. We really appreciate you being there. And I just wanted to touch on that last slide where you're showing people being very active. And I think what I really like about this is it's a kind of switching from a left brain kind of approaches to the more right brain creative ways of thinking. And I think that opens up different ways of doing things. And that's part of what we mean by seeing, thinking and doing differently. Now, I'm really delighted to introduce Rachel Sinha. Rachel is the co-founder of the Systems Studio. The founder of the Systems Studio and the co-founder of the Finance Innovation Lab and the Systems Sanctuary. Rachel's coming to us from Missouri. We're hugely grateful to her for being here so early in the day for her. She's applied systems thinking in various different ways. We reached out to her to talk about the Finance Innovation Lab, which has got some parallels with what we're doing, but she's got a huge amount of experience of applying these kinds of approaches globally. So welcome, Rachel. Thank you very much. I'm going to hand over to you now.
Thank you. Let me see if I can share my screen 1 second. Is that working? Yes. Yeah, so really lovely to meet you all. Thank you for having me, and excited to be here at the kickoff of your project. I want to start by just sharing a little bit about my about how the Finance Innovation Lab started and just some of the things I've learned along the way, because I think so the Finance Innovation Lab is a partnership between WWF and the Institute of Chartered Accountants in England and Wales. And I was working in ICAW at the time in a sustainability think tank in 2008. And we were kind of bumbling around trying to work out what to do about how to think about how markets work to bring about sustainable change at the time. And we partnered with WWF to do what we thought would be a one-off event, hosted it in Chartered Accountants Hall, which is right in the middle of Moorgate and has all the images of the founding fathers of the accounting profession all over the wall and huge, great big ginormous doors and lots of marble. And WWF brought all of their stakeholders. So they were kind of ecological economists and environmental justice campaigners, members of the clergy, all sorts of different people. And we brought ours, which were like sustainability professionals that had a link to accountancy, and impact investors, I think, and traders, venture capitalists, all sorts of different people that were in our network, to this great big event that was really badly designed. And WWF had the brilliant idea of making it sound like we had pouring water coming into the room when people arrived, and put lots of statues from around the world all over the thing. So it was like a bit of a mess of a start, but basically the idea being, let's bring together these people who don't normally talk to each other and have a conversation at this moment of the financial crisis happening. And it was amazing. I mean, it was extremely badly designed, but what happened was people got to talk to people that they don't normally talk to about this issue that they really care about in small groups. And that alone gave the project the momentum to start going. And over the next 8 years or so, I co-led it in the end with 2 other women, and we sort of nurtured the seeds of lots of growing movements of change that were happening in London at the time. So there was kind of a pocket of people who were looking at impact investing, and others who were looking at alternative currencies with the Brixton pound and things like that. And then there were, of course, like the ESG people who were in the heart of the financial system, looking at those issues. And we worked with the UN Environment Programme to look at natural capital. And so I think what we did was we sort of nurtured the seeds of these growing movements by bringing together people in small pockets who wanted to change the same thing, getting them to understand from a systemic perspective what they were doing in more detail. And as a result, ended up launching a whole load of projects looking at, Audit Futures, which was looking at the future of the audit profession with the Big Four accountancy firms, but also with lots of different economic justice campaigners and other activists who were, at the time we had Occupy Wall Street camping outside of our offices. So, we brought some of those people into that conversation. And we worked with the UN Environment Programme looking at natural capitals, and the Natural Capitals Coalition started and is now funded by the World Bank in a separate organisation. Much like Anna's drawing, it was not, there were many, many things that we did that failed miserably. I just want to be really clear about that. But some of the things that came out of it were amazing. We built, we partnered to create a kind of leadership program for economic justice campaigners with systems thinking built in. So I think what some of the things that worked really well were spotting the leadership of people who wanted to bring about change and were very motivated to do it. So it's not necessarily about bringing the big names into the room, although that's helpful. To start with, you need to find the people who are genuinely really passionate about it, and create the space for them to have a deeper conversation and protect the prototypes, we always used to say. What you don't need is lots of critical friends around. What you do need is lots of champions. So I would say that's a really important message for this first year of your work. As Anna said, naming the power is a really important part of this, and recognising who has power in the current system when you're convening. I will carry on. And the other thing, touching on what you were saying, just very briefly, human systems have been invented by us. A group of people come together to try and solve a problem, and over time they build institutions and markets and organizations that solve that problem with the best of intentions. But over time the world changes and change is called for. But yet this is our common response to dealing with those kind of problems, is that we sit around and we have these panel sessions and conversations about it, and nothing changes. And so I think what systems change does is it captures this idea, which is from Margaret Mead, everyone's favourite anthropologist, who says, never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. And I think, I now work with lots of people, coaching and training people who are leading these different systems change internationally, and here are some of the projects I've worked on over the years. And this is what everybody's doing, you know, is that you bring people together, whoever they are, you create little pockets of people who want to change things, you allow space for conversation, you deepen that conversation, you capture the energy of ideas that could bring about change, and you just have a go at prototyping them and getting them started and getting them funded. And so, yeah, I just wanted to share, you know, these are some of the women that I worked with who are leading systemic change in different places. But yeah, I would just say that it was very helpful for me when we started the Finance Innovation Lab to hear a story that something small that starts on a beach can turn into a big fat project that people refer to and invite you to speak about later. So I encourage you to keep going. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rachel. We're really heartened to hear that. And I think it's really interesting hearing from you about how something so messy and it felt rather intangible at the beginning, but seemed like a good idea anyway. And you were kind of listening to your gut and bringing these people together and hoping that something good came from it. And obviously all of the things that have happened since then have been amazing. So we're really heartened by that too. And hopefully we'll be coming back to speak in 7 or 8 years' time about what we've achieved and all the pockets that we've supported to grow. So thank you so much. We're going to now spend 10 minutes or so with some questions for Anna and Rachel. If anybody's got any questions, either pop them in the Q&A or in the chat, or even pop up your hand the old-fashioned way. Has anybody got any questions?
We've got a question from one of our panelists, Jeffrey, for Anna, but I think it's open to Rachel as well, on any advice on what we as people can do to break through entrenched bureaucratic processes in government to make systems, methodologies the core of how we address complex issues. So any examples from Anna and Rachel around navigating, working with governments and those sorts of systems would be great. And then I'll come to Molly.
Yeah, my experience of, I would say government, but there are other institutions and organisations that are also entrenched. I think we're all a bit entrenched, and I think there is something about, yes, how do you move from the experimentation and the trying it out and bringing the passion to demonstrating it differently. So a lot of experimentation is how do you demonstrate there is an alternative way to do things, and that you can, you can still achieve. How do you monitor or find evidence that these approaches are both what's the word, kind of achieving what the current mainstream wants, so that they're kind of quantifiable, or the kind of still being efficient or effective, but also what additionality do they bring? So a lot of these different approaches can bring the additionality of adaptability. And when we look at things, and I've worked with health systems, when we saw the outbreak of COVID, the ability to move and adapt and change to the context is really important. And so, if you have these processes in place, then it can enable us to do it. But the real thing that I think to break the entrenchment in these processes is really the logic, the logic of government, and going back to the idea of paradigm. How do we break the narrative and sort of say that the narrative of change has to shift? So using examples like I just did about COVID, about why the current business as usual processes aren't fit for purpose, because they're not actually working, or fit for the healthy system we want to see, is also a key part of the work. And that's why we do capacity building and practice development to help people to kind of shift their mindset as well as their practice.
Yeah, I would add to that the change it within existing organisations, institutions like the government is sometimes extremely slow and hard work. Burnout can be prevalent. What's really important is finding the pocket of people, again, who want to change that thing across departments, potentially across the organisation at all levels, creating a sort of mini club, a community of practice of people that's held over a long period of time, where you can show up and be honest about the real challenges that you're facing and create a different culture within that beast. And I think over time, if that's held well, strategically, it can start to attract others who are like, I want to be part of that club. That looks like a really fun, interesting place, and can just help you to keep going within that context.
Thanks, Rachel. Thank you both so much. I think that's really interesting because I think, well, we shared our story that we were feeling very disempowered, and I had been working in Parliament where I also experienced those entrenched mindsets, and I think they are across the board. I think not just in our, government institutions, they're everywhere. And I think part of what we want to do with this organisation is to show people that they do have agency, that there will always be something, even if it's very small, that they can do to try something a bit different, to go with their feelings and their senses around what might need to happen, and to step into that and try to do something. Thank you. Who's next in terms of
going to come
questions?
to Beverly's put something in the question. I don't know if Beverly, you want to ask your question. Beverly Barnett, you want to unmute yourself. It's a really good point about criminal and family justice.
Hi.
Thanks, Beverly.
Beverly Barnett -Jones from the Nuffield Family Justice Observatory. So I'm obviously going to ask about family justice. So I'm going to declare that straight away. Really, really welcome this initiative, and well done to the three of you, because I bang on about transformative change and what we need to be thinking system. I follow the school of system change. I try and do what I can in my own little world, in the little pockets that you create in the world that we operate in. But I suppose, again, I just wanted to ask, how do we think about, the way we think about people engaging in a criminal justice or a justice capture, in the way the system works, and how complicated the lives of people are, and how the systems work so differently and against each other, where you're walking through a criminal system to a family system, in the youth justice space, the whole story is about, community and family, and how we think about talking more about that in the work that you're doing, because it did strike me straight away, I don't see any mention of the family story. Yet, when we look at like the social justice questions that come out of the criminal justice story, so much of it is about how families and communities are being needs are not being met, or being actively kind of, discriminated against, or there were major disparities. So it's just a way of bringing that to you. I'd love to have a conversation with you, about it, but just wanted to put it on the agenda because I'm here to listen and learn as well, but just wanted to share that sort of thought with you about how people's lives are so complicated, and when we're thinking about the transformative, what is it that we're really driving under there to see those changed outcomes in the way that you're seeking, and I just wanted to put a sort of statement there about the family justice system. It's tiny, but it's mighty in what it does to people's lives. Yeah,
Thank you so much, Beverly.
No
We're
worries.
really, but I think you made a very good point, and we've deliberately, there's no getting away from the fact that Nina, Anita, and I have come from criminal justice backgrounds, but we speak to a lot of people in those systems and in other systems. I actually reviewed a system in Guernsey, with the justice system in Guernsey, that was looking at civil and criminal justice, and those patterns are, I think that was what brought it alive to me, doing that piece of work, that the patterns that you're talking about in the family justice system are in all the other systems and in the criminal justice system too. So part of what systems approaches are about is bringing that alive, visualizing that, helping people to see that actually we're stuck in these, that these patterns are playing out all over the place. So yeah, we'd be delighted to have a conversation with you. I don't know if you want to talk about complexity and point, Anna and Rachel. How do you kind of get into that complexity and try and get through it?
Don't know if Rachel wanted to go first this time. But there was also a question about working. Well, there's something in that about the complexity approach needing to not just be based in the silo of a certain system. So when you say criminal justice system, or when you say a health system, a health system is actually, it's actually about how do we, only because I've worked in that system a bit more, it's not just about the care delivery system, it's also about the community and the wider things. So how do you always zoom out when you're taking a complexity approach and not just being limited by the boundary of current ways that we see our systems? And then there's something which somebody also asked a question about, what cases and outcomes have I seen? And I worked in the education system for many years, and we had a lot of success through changing policies, changing teacher training, changing a lot of Ofsted, the how we judge schools. But actually, the new government came in and kind of wiped away a lot of those perceived outcomes and changes that we'd created over sort of 8 years. And my story always goes that the real changes that we saw was the capacity and the people who were hundreds of people we worked with over those years to build their capacity to lead differently, and to continue to create change. Although I've left working directly in that sector many years ago, I still hear stories and still come across people who are continuing the change, and the kind of the embedded change was actually the capacity of those passionate people in the system. And so I guess that's why we're looking. I'd love to work with Justice Futures on how do we bring that kind of capacity and collaborate on building that kind of capacity to the justice systems. And I say systems purposely, the systems that are affecting how we understand justice, because I think that's why I do what I do. My belief is that the capacity of people to continually do the change is how we're gonna really transform things, rather than just sort of changing the external factors, which is just important, but don't really get to the core and the underpinning of some of these things as well.
Thank you. Conscious Rachel is taking her time out of her morning routine in order to do this for us. So I don't know if you need to go, Rachel.
Oh. Yeah, I will just add something, and then I'll have to go actually and get the kids ready for school, which they are supposed to be doing themselves, and they're not doing in any way. So it's going to be a rush.
Oh dear, been there, seen that. Oh dear, sorry.
Yeah, no. I would just say that I think that's why it's really important to have representation from different parts of the system. Like, even though parts of the system have the power to convene, some parts have the power to host a conversation, and everyone's going to be there, right? But actually you need to create spaces that are independent to a certain degree, where you have a representation from different parts of the system, knowing that everyone holds a piece and no one sees everything, so that you can navigate that complexity with some democratization. Yeah,
thank you so much. I'm afraid we're going to have to move on now to our next panel of speakers. Thank you so much to Anna and Rachel.